Hi, my friends call me Lime, and does the Bible teach that homosexuality is wrong? Well, in this episode, we'll take a look at the following two passages. Do not have sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman. That is detestable. If a man has sexual relations with a man as one does with a woman, both of them have done what is detestable. They are to be put to death. Their blood will be on their own heads. So, let's take a look at these passages. In this series, we're going to analyze every passage in the Bible that people use to try to argue against homosexuality. And we're going to look at why I and so many Christians believe that the homo-friendly interpretations make more sense. Now, the first thing to notice is that neither of these passages speak against a woman lying with a woman as one lies with a man, while both men and women are told not to have sexual relations with animals. So Leviticus 18 and 20 don't seem to send a message against homosexuality, at least not as a whole, because female homosexuality is excluded. And so then it becomes interesting to ask, why are only men included in this commandment? And the second thing to notice is that it is physically impossible for a man to have vaginal sex with someone who doesn't have a vagina. And so what do they really mean by as one lies with a woman? And as I started gathering information about these things, it became obvious to me that neither of these passages say what homonegative people think that they say. Let's begin by taking a look at yet another part of my interview with Svartvik.
So it says in Hebrew, Ve'etzachar lo tishkav mishkevei isha to'evahi. And with a man, you shouldn't lie a woman's lying because it is an abomination. So we need to look at every single word there, actually. So to whom is this commandment mentioned or stated? Well, obviously to a man, because the reader, the implied reader, as we say, of the Hebrew Bible in a patriarchal society is the man. He is the one who is supposed to read and apply the texts. This means that we have no references, no text whatsoever, as far as I know, in the Hebrew Bible, in the Torah, in what Christians call the Old Testament, about lesbian relations. So you can't say that the Bible is against homosexuality, because it isn't, because half of the group is not mentioned at all. So why would only men be mentioned? And why is it an abomination? It's a word used in many contexts, but we have to think about what does it mean to be treated mishkevei isha, to be as a woman is. And in antiquity, both in the Hebrew Bible and certainly in the New Testament, because we have so many texts from the surrounding context in Greek and in Latin, so we know this for sure, there was an understanding that people were not either men or women, as we might say today. There are two sexes, and if you go to a public toilet, you look for whether the sign on the toilet is someone wearing a dress or not. And if it's a dress, you go to the women's toilet. Either you go to the men's bathroom and toilet. And that is the only important distinction. Whereas in antiquity, this was not the case. There was only one sex, and you were more or less a man. So a man was supposed to behave in a manly manner, and a woman should be brave, but she shouldn't become too much of a man, because then she was threatening men. And men should certainly not behave in a womanly way, as women do. And therefore, for example, in the early Christian texts about Christians who were about to become martyrs. The last thing that the woman heard was andritsestai, the word meaning play the man, be brave, don't cry, don't be afraid, be brave. And the word that they used was to play the man, to be manly. So a man should be a man, and a woman could be a man, but not too much. And that is very much part of these texts, I would say, and how they have been understood in history. That if a man is penetrated, he is treated as a woman. And if you look down upon women and think that a man should be superior, not only when they are talking in the parliament and women don't have a vote, he should also be superior in the bedroom. He should decide what to do and when to do, and she doesn't have a vote there either. For a man to be treated in a way that women are usually treated would be a disgrace. It would be to'eva. It would be an abomination. So I would say that the stepping stone for the entire understanding of this text in a patriarchal society, and also when it was read by people in patriarchal societies, was that as long as you look down upon women, men should not be treated as women. But when you talk about equality, when you say that a woman's no is a no, when you want to do everything you can to help people to live in mutuality, then something happens with the interpretation of this text.
Also, let's take a look at the word used in the passages. Let's take a look at mishkava. This is how I understood it. It's not about gender. It is about status. If you treat someone as if they are below you when they're not, then that is something that we react strongly against. I mean, few people react when seeing a dog on a leash. In the society that we live in today, that's just normal. But should you leash your child, then that would be extremely degrading and probably illegal. You do not treat a child like a dog. And should you treat an adult like a child, then that would also spark a lot of anger. So what happens when a man penetrates another man in a society where penetration is seen as an act of domination and men are supposed to be equal? It would seem degrading because he's being treated as lesser than he is. And this needs to be taken into consideration when interpreting these passages. It's not about gender, it is about status, and status can change. And so then what happens when a society like that changes? When their view on sex and sexism change?
When the Declaration of Independence was written down in it commences with the words, all men are created equal with certain unalienable rights, and among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was written down by a person who wasn't very interested in women's right to vote. But eventually women were allowed to vote in the US, and people have to ask, is this against this text written by Thomas Jefferson? And secondly, all men are created equal. Well, he talked about men and not women, but he also talked about white men and not people of color, because we know that he had slaves. He had many slaves. He had, according to what I've read, second most slaves in the entire county where he lived. And he had at least one child with a slave woman, and he sold that slave, his own blood and flesh, he saw that human being as a slave. So
Wow.
when he wrote that text, he had slaves and he did not work for the equality of women. But however, when Abraham Lincoln added something to the Constitution and saying there should no longer be slaves in this country, and when the last state in the US says, yes, we want women to have the possibility to vote, either we say this is against the Constitution, this is against the Declaration of Independence, or we say this is in the very fabric of the text. Now the text is being fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I see the text in Leviticus chapter 18 and 20 in a similar way. When we read them in a patriarchal society, it is a problem for a man to be treated as if he were a woman. If we read it in a society in which we want the fabric to be equality and justice, righteousness, it is no longer a problem. So I would say that a free interpretation of these verses, but something that catches the spirit of it, is that neither a man nor a woman should be treated disrespectfully.
And also about the two Leviticus passages, they're not talking about just lying beside someone. They're talking about a sexual act, and that act is likely penetration. But the way they phrase it is interesting. They are not just saying that a man shall not lie with another man, period. I mean, they could have said that, but they don't. What they're saying is that a man shall not lie a woman's lying, or a man shall not lie with another man as one lies with a woman, and that changes things. I mean, if someone tells you not to throw a ball, then that's one thing. But if someone tells you not to throw a ball like a girl, then that's completely different.
Get to the ball! Get to the ball! Yes, throw it! No, not like a girl. What are you doing? Throw the ball!
You told me not to throw it!
What? No, I said... How can you possibly take it like that?
Do you want me to throw the ball or not?
I want you to throw the ball, but not like a girl.
You need to make up your mind, sir.
Just throw the ball!
It would take a lot of mental gymnastics to turn "don't throw the ball like a girl" into "don't throw the ball at all." And the same goes for what's written in Leviticus. And these two passages are two of the most commonly used to justify homonegativity, and at the same time, it seems like these were also the easiest to crack. I mean, because to me, it's so obvious that this is not about gender and what gender you can have sex with. It's about how you have the sex, why, and in what context.